Hello and happy Monday evening.
Happy Monday evening, one and all.
Hope you're having a good one.
Absolutely.
Just before we kick off, tickets are now on sale for the Two Mats Live, an evening with the Two Mats.
No dynamic pricing?
No dynamic pricing. November the 25th at the Phoenix in Cavendish Square.
It's going to be great.
It's going to be great. So go to theneweuropean.co.uk/Two Mats Live. That's the number 2, MATTS Live.
And enjoy.
And enjoy. Anyone who's there will enjoy, guaranteed.
Or else.
Or else no refunds.
No refunds.
What are we talking about this evening?
Well, I think we have to talk about exciting new Prime Minister, which I'm trying to do, and I'm trying to approach this in a constructive way. Went to Birmingham today to give a rousing speech about the budget on Wednesday.
Yeah.
And we know there's been a bit of a bumpy run up to the budget.
That you could describe it as a bit bumpy.
A little bit on the bumpy side. Labour's first fiscal event since 2010, so it's the quite high stakes.
First ever budget delivered by a woman.
Massive historic event.
Yep.
So here's a quick blast of exciting Mr. Keir getting pretty butch in his speech in Birmingham.
Okay.
Let's have a blast of that.
If people want to criticise the path we choose, that's their prerogative. But let them spell out a different direction. If they think the state has grown too big, let them tell working people which public services they would cut. If they think tax rises are unfair, let them tell working people which taxes they'd raise instead. If they don't see our long-term investment in infrastructure as necessary, let them explain to working people how they would grow the economy for them. And if they think that taxes are too high, but they don't want to cut public spending, let them tell working people why the lessons of Liz Truss no longer apply.
So basically it's sort of Ninja Max Headroom is the play.
Can I just answer one of his questions?
Please do.
When he says, if he thinks that we should we should increase other taxes, tell me which ones. Well, basically the ones that you said you wouldn't do in your manifesto, that would have been fair and equitable for the whole of society.
But you're not.
But you can't do because you said you wouldn't do it in your manifesto.
And also wealth taxes, as we've been saying on the podcast for a year.
Exactly.
But it's interesting because Rishi Sunak got to this play towards the end of his glorious reign.
It's a bit early for this, isn't it?
If you think you could do better, you just show me.
Yeah.
But actually, in the first few months, to get to that point is a little bit dispiriting.
And there's a bit of a theme going on here. I mean, this is very defensive, isn't it? And
it is.
And we've seen, and it ties in with the NHS about, tell us what you would like to do to the NHS.
Yeah.
Well, no, mate, you're the bloody health secretary.
Yeah,
you tell us.
You tell us. So let's sort of get the common ground out of the way. You know, we all acknowledge that they had a lousy inheritance. That it's barely 2 years since Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng crashed the economy. Yeah. And I think we agreed on the pod at various stages that it was clear that Rishi Sunak and Jeremy Hunt were doing a scorched earth policy. And, you know, Rachel Reeves came up in July and said there was a 22 billion quid black hole. And there was a certain amount of sort of consternation about that, but it does seem from what the Office for Budget Responsibility has said that the Tories did mislead them a bit. So they've got a bad inheritance, right? We got that, right?
But also, can I just make the simple observation that is why they're in power?
Yeah, precisely.
Because the Tories screwed the economy so badly that that's why you got voted in.
But we acknowledge all that, you know. But okay, so what have we had so far? We've had the winter fuel allowance cut disaster. And then today, in terms of just retail politics, we had that they're going to increase the bus fare cap from £2 to £3, which is actually quite a lot.
Well, it's a tenner a week, isn't it?
Which is
£2.
a lot.
It's good. Potentially, someone who takes the bus there and back to work, it's an extra £2 a day, 5 days a week, £10. It's an extra 500 quid of taxed income someone's going to have to find.
I mean that for that for a party that sort of sells itself as being for working people, of which more and on, it seemed to me a surprising priority to set aside. Now, it's quite clear that there's going to be some good news about hospitals and schools in the budget. That's obvious. Yeah. I suppose I don't know how you are feeling about it all. My problem is that Starmer doesn't seem to be able to see a political cul-de-sac without hurtling down it. And there's this, I mean, I've spoken to a few Labour people and they're furious that it's turned into a row and think we the media being trivial about it. This whole row of what a working person is, right? But I'm sorry, you Labour raised the question. So last week, Wes Streeting, the Health and Social Care Secretary, said that he wouldn't consider himself as a working person because of his relatively high income as the cabinet minister, and the implication seemed to be that it was all about a level of income.
Right.
And then last week also, Starmer asked whether someone who works but also has an income from assets such as shares and property, were they a working person? Starmer said, well, they wouldn't come within my definition. But just to load up the confusion, on Sunday, Bridget Phillipson told Laura Kuenssberg that she was a working person and she's another cabinet minister. Today, Monday, Shami Chakrabarti, member of the Lords, said on Politics Live that she wasn't. And Starmer, and then I think this was just kind of, epic, but bad political messaging, said in his speech, the working people of this country know exactly who they are. So basically, we've gone now to self-ID, and we're going to have class or reveal parties where you get all your mates around to disclose whether or not you're a working person or a running dog of capitalism, right?
Well, there's the other one.
Balloons and
the other category is strivers. It's a budget for the strivers.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
I don't know. And I mean,
the other thing is that it's what they've managed to do, and almost
totally unnecessary problem.
Almost exclusively, they've managed to piss people off.
Yes.
They've pissed off the pensioners with the winter fuel allowance.
Yes.
They've pissed off people who have to take a bus to work.
Which is a lot of people.
They've pissed off people like landlords who have now been painted as the running dogs of capitalism, but actually, landlords have to. It is a job.
Okay,
you have to do stuff. You're not sitting there counting your money.
I looked that one up, right? Because everyone in this debate, landlords are being presented as running dogs of capitalism, right?
Yeah.
Now, the average UK landlord earns about 32,800 a year,
which is just above the average national wage.
It's less.
Isn't it? It's less, is it? Right.
The median income is 34,500. Right. So whatever you think about the notion of the rentier class, they're not rolling in it.
No, they've pissed off small business owners massively, and because small business owners are going to bear the brunt of the national insurance rise. And they haven't pleased, to my certain knowledge, they haven't pleased anybody yet.
I mean, the pressure now on Reeves is off the charts because she has to produce some sort of half-alive rabbit from the sad sack on Wednesday. Something that says we're all about investment in health and education and other services. Now, one of the things she's done, which the city is not thrilled about, but I personally think was a good change, which she's altered the fiscal rule about borrowing for investment.
Yes.
So she's redefined. I mean, listen, the weeds are
not day-to-day spending, but capital investment.
No, but it's how you define debt. So she's basically including. It's a net assessment of debt, which includes assets owned by the illiquid assets owned by the government. And the city's like, we're a bit worried about that, but I don't think it will trigger a trust style meltdown, right?
No, because the city broadly buys into the concept that you are going to have to borrow to invest.
Exactly. And they want but government investment leads to inward investment is the old cliche, and it's probably true. And so what
does that mean?
Basically, governments build infrastructure, hospitals, schools, housing.
Yeah.
Businesses want to come and work there.
Yes.
If you're a business, you don't want to go to the scenes seen in the Specials video of Ghost Town, right? Do you? If you're Tesla, right? You don't.
Yeah, it's a serious point, and I know I bore on about Liverpool too often, but Liverpool is a case where you can see the benefits of
Right,
that. A little
right.
bit of infrastructure, and suddenly you get this huge hockey stick
because
curve.
you know, I mean, to put it in crude terms, you know, if you build nice housing, good infrastructure, decent shops open,
Yeah.
you know, lovies and professionals and things will set up shop there. I mean, it's
Yeah.
just a rule. So that's a kind of there's a benevolent cycle there, and it's good that she's doing something to give her more headroom on public investment. I think is absolutely right. There are other bits of it that I think they haven't thought through at all. One is freezing thresholds. Okay, now this is the old problem of fiscal drag, and it means if she does freeze income tax thresholds, it means that anyone earning over 37,700, which, as we've already discussed, is a lot of people,
Yep.
will get dragged into the 40% bracket.
Amazing.
And I think that's a huge. I mean, you want to talk about what is a working person. A working person does not want to have
I mean, that is
their earnings caught by 40%.
Let's just repeat that. So somebody who's earning just $3,000 more than the average, the median salary in the
Yep.
UK, will suddenly be a top-end taxpayer.
Well, they already are. I mean, the point about fiscal drag obviously is that as your earnings buy less
Yeah.
because of inflation, even
Yeah.
at a low level. But if thresholds don't rise,
I didn't appreciate it was that. It was that.
Yeah,
low.
you get into the 40% rate
really quickly.
quite quickly.
Yeah.
The first 12.5 grand is tax free.
Yeah. And there's talk of raising the minimum wage, isn't there? Which
Yeah.
will please a lot of people,
That
I
will
guess.
that will please people.
But Matt, let's just go back to the biggest picture of all, which is the whole story they got elected on, which was growth.
Right.
Now, where is this growth coming from? If you refuse to countenance a meaningful change in our relationship with the European Union, i.e. the single market, that's off the table.
I don't know. Yeah,
That's
and
one.
that unfortunately affects everything that
That's
follows
right.
in this discussion.
But that would be the biggest how to get an uptick in
would
growth
be-
in a wanna, right?
yeah.
But that's off the table for
Yeah.
dogmatic reasons.
Yeah.
You are penalising business owners with a significant 22 billion quid's worth of national insurance
Yes.
rise. You're going to penalise them further, the business owners, although it's to the benefit of a lot of workers, by increasing minimum wage. You're also adding in lots of further restrictions on employment rights. So you are making life tougher for business owners. But the whole model is dependent on growth.
Right. Well, what you're saying, if you're them, without saying it, the quiet bit that they won't say out loud, is that they believe in the public sector. Fine. They believe in big business because big business can handle this, right?
Yeah.
But they don't really have much to offer on entrepreneurs and small businesses. Now, in this era in particular, where growth is not coming from, necessarily from big established corporations. I mean, some of it is, you want big plants being set up here. That's all true. But you also want an environment that's conducive to, biotech startups, and so on. And this is not it.
And they're also, so we're led to believe, and the thing I forgot was the hitting capital gains.
Yes.
Which is, and I've heard, and I found, honestly, mate, I've got to stop listening to the radio now when talk about a Freudian slip. When Labour ministers,
Matt.
Yeah, I know, you wouldn't believe it though, would you? Sometimes when Labour ministers are on the radio, obfuscating and talking, semantics around working people and all of this business, and never answering a bloody question, and I found myself screaming at the radio, for fuck's sake, will you please answer the question?
Yes.
Around capital gains tax, I think it was Ellie Reeves, and she would say, yes, but it only affects 0.05% of the population in any 1 year who actually pay capital gains tax. And I was just saying, yes, but that's the 0.5% of people who are doing the bloody growth.
Yes, you put your finger on it, which is if you are betting the shop on growth, you can't then have a budget which is basically about just keeping the public sector happy. Now, I totally believe that, the government is going to have to grow in the 21st century. Pay levels were too low in the public sector, all the above, right? I'm not against any of that. But there is a sort of old soft leftish side to Starmer. a sort of pre-New Labour side to Starmer, which does, I think he is not actually that clear on where growth in the 21st century really comes from.
No. Well, it's a bit of a problem if his bet is that there's going to materialise some growth in our economy, but he hasn't really got a clue where it's coming from. That's a problem.
His investment summit was quite analogue in a funny way, because it was, lots of posh folk flying in to be glad-handed and, grand folk and all the rest of it.
It was like a scene out of industry.
It was. And also, I don't think he really understands, I don't want to come on all Milton Friedman here, because this is that's not for here.
Is that what? How did Milton Friedman speak?
No, I didn't know. But I don't do an impression of Milton Friedman. Sorry to disappoint the listeners. No, but actually, it was Adam Smith, wasn't it? Talked about animal spirits. I mean, the animal spirits of the economy have to play a part, not the only part, but a part in growth. If you want growth, you have to have those sort of pulsing spirits of entrepreneurialism. Now, a Labour government clearly needs to regulate them more and tax them more and all the rest of it. What it can't do is, which is what I fear is happening, is ignore them. Now, hopefully, by the end of Wednesday, I'll be completely of a different view and think, wow, Rachel Reeves really understands how to mobilise these startups in the life science sector and the tech sector and everything. She's great. And 5 years from now, there's going to be a completely different sort of economic landscape. But I have to say that speech in Birmingham was not reassuring in any respect. And you're right, the point you made at the top about it being very defensive was the whole point. I think looking back, how do you raise taxes? And the classic example, I think, is, and it's a small one, but it was really interesting. In 2002, Brown decided that he needed a really big injection of money into the NHS. He was Chancellor then, obviously. And so for quite a while before announcing it, he rolled out in various sort of coded and then less coded ideas, the idea of a 1% hike in national insurance just for the NHS, hypothecated for the NHS, right? Yeah. By the time they got there, 6.1 billion increase, everyone was on board for it because they saw, 1% national insurance. Well, I'm not thrilled about paying more, but you're right, the health service needs more money. Yeah. But my point is that it wasn't a sort of argument about what constitutes, how do you define a wombat? How exactly do we define an aardvark? I don't know, but it was all about, this is a really good idea. Yeah. Here's why we're doing it. Yeah. They're not doing that.
They're not. And that ties into our central complaint, which has been
narrative.
The narrative, the lack of, they keep talking about mission-led, mission this, mission that, but mission to what? Mission to do what? Fixing the foundations. What does that actually mean?
Yes.
And what does it translate as?
I mean, it doesn't mean much. And also, it doesn't really speak to... I mean, the art of politics, when you're a progressive government, is to take people's anxieties and hopes and connect them explicitly and understandably to something that they might not like initially, but you can explain to them why it will work a few years down the line. Now, everybody knows the shopping list of huge issues that face this government. But what I don't have I don't have that elevator pitch in my head, which is more than, oh, it's really bad.
Do you know what I think the problem is? There are so many contradictions in what they've been saying over the last few months. For instance, the 2-child cap on benefits, right? Now, I was just listening to Evan Davis on radio on PM as I came in, and almost had to park the car to appreciate the information I was seeing. Hungary, right, facing the same declining birth rate.
Yes,
everyone is, right. Hungary is investing 5% of its budget. It pays 3% for defence. It's investing 5% in childbirth, in procreation benefits, right? It's saying if you have 4 children or more, you, as a mother, you won't pay tax. Things like this. Now, we are facing the same declining demographic, and in 20 years' time, we're going to have the big issue, aside from the fact that the planet's on fire, will be the fact that we can't afford people's pensions anymore.
Yes.
Because there just aren't enough young people coming through,
and because
in society,
no government of any ideological stamp, it would appear, will adopt a sensible, progressive approach to migration.
Exactly.
We're not even allowed to bring people in.
So we are penalising people for having more than 2 children.
But we're also standing at the border shouting,
we don't
no
you
freedom
come
of
into
movement.
don't come into our country.
Yep.
And the third part of that equation is, we haven't got enough people. We haven't got enough nurses.
Yeah.
We've got a massive shortfall of nurses. We haven't got enough people to pick soft fruits in the sun. We just haven't got enough people. Now, what kind of dickhead policy is this?
Well, it's a Starmer policy, Matt.
Well, put it like that. It's
a mission, you could call it.
I mean, honestly, why can't they just tell the truth?
I think there is a deep structural problem here, which is that, and I've obviously been thinking a lot about this in connection with America, or we all hope Kamala Harris will do it, right? But there is a problem that the progressive response to the populist era is drearily technocratic.
Yeah.
And that's not always been true.
Yeah.
There have been, this is not a progressive characteristic. Some of the great political narratives of the last 50 years, you could argue most of them have been progressive. But for some reason, I haven't quite got to the bottom of, at the moment, partly I think it's terror. I don't think they're so tightly wrapped and worried about caution and not upsetting anyone that they almost say nothing. And I would like to see a slightly less inhibited Starmer and Reeves, but I don't think we're going to see it.
I don't think they've got it in them.
I don't think they've got it in them, and that is a serious worry because
I think he's the Eric Ten Hag of
and
politics.
Who, by the way, is not a working person as of today. Right, just for definitional purposes. So it's really worrying, and I think that when the election happened, I thought, well, 167 seat majority, at least that's 2 terms, right? And now I'm starting to think maybe it's 2 terms because if Trump wins and reform is energized and the right of the Tory party is energized, I think things could look very different.
100% agree. And I haven't met in the last few weeks anybody who has anything but a bad opinion of how this government's going about things. I mean, ranging from it's been a bit of a crap start, hasn't it? Let's hope things turn the corner, to this guy is useless and can't do politics.
I mean,
I'm not talking about Tory friends.
No. I completely understand. I mean, one of the things to bear in mind in all of this, and God knows we've seen enough evidence of it from the Conservative side in the last decade, is that a vanishingly small proportion of the political class, let alone the population, are up to this job. It is incredibly hard to be a prime minister. Yeah, right. It's very hard to be a chancellor too. But I do worry that, we have to reserve judgment a little bit until after Wednesday. But let us just say that the auguries are not very good. Before we take a quick break, we should point out that it's not been a total waste of a day because Tommy Robinson's just got 18 months nick. Yes, that was a cheerful. That was a good news story. That did cheer me up immensely. Yeah, and he's having and wonderfully, given his views on race, he's in segregation. Poor Tommy. Which I thought was ironic. Poor when the first thing he says when he goes into Nick is, "You're in segregation, mate." That will go down very well, wouldn't it? Right, let's take a very quick break, and we're going to talk about some media bad dark deeds. Indeed. So, Matt, the big news in the media world, although I suspect this has probably escaped real, ordinary, proper people. I don't think it'll, by and large. I don't think it'll, I mean, I suppose when I start, before we even start, by saying, it probably won't change a single vote.
No, well,
right?
I mean, this is the conversation.
Yeah.
Well, let's say what's happened.
All right.
The Washington Post, which
storied liberal newspaper,
home of the Watergate,
Pentagon
reporting,
Papers,
Pentagon
Woodward,
paper, all of it.
Bernstein movies galore.
One of the great titles of American journalism.
Yeah.
Announced that it
on
Friday, like a fortnight before the US election, that it wasn't going to endorse any candidate.
Although there was already from the opinion team a editorial written saying we support Kamala Harris.
So it transpires very quickly.
Yeah.
Because what part of the beautiful nature of this story is how much is coming out from the Washington Post
about
how
crap
the Washington Post is.
I mean, that is one of the things that makes me slightly hopeful about democracy, is that it's attacking itself.
So
right?
Jeff Bezos told Sir William Lewis, a.k.a. Will Lewis,
publisher of the Washington Post.
Formerly of the Daily Telegraph, then
and of News International,
Wall Street
Journal, all the rest
and
of it.
And then knighted by David Cameron for
services to lying.
Services for, we're not quite sure
Yeah.
what services were provided, but anyway, knighted by Cameron, and Will Lewis had to go out and explain to the newsroom that already hates him because he's implicated in the phone hacking scandal, that actually they weren't going to endorse anybody because he thought the Washington Post readers were clever enough to make up their own minds.
And also he claimed, which is one of the biggest loads of nonsense ever, that the true tradition of the Washington Post was not to endorse people.
Correct.
Now they've been endorsing
since '76 or something.
And also they literally in the last few weeks endorsed someone for the Maryland Senate and one of the Virginia House races. So I mean, they do endorse. They've just decided not to endorse someone in the most consequential election since records began.
And what is that's what's happened. And you can.
This was agreed with Bezos. In September.
You can write it off as a sort of media story, and who cares what newspapers think anymore anyway. But what I think is significant is it's interesting that it's Bezos who said, no, we're going to tap dance around Trump a little bit on this one, folks. Because Bezos and Trump hate each other.
They do.
And Bezos sued Trump when Trump was president for the cancellation of some big contracts. But Bezos is still trying to, because of course business is business, right?
Right.
Blue Origin, his company's got a big contract with NASA.
Bezos, $3.4 billion on that. Then there's the contract, the NSA cloud contract that Trump withheld from him has been quietly given to him since Trump's been out of office, and that's worth $10 billion. Yeah, right. Wonderful. The contract's code name is Wild and Stormy, which is I like that very much.
Wasn't that one of Trump's girlfriends?
It sounds like one of them, doesn't it? But in one of those sort of absolutely flagrant out there Trump showing exactly what's going on, he met Blue Origin, the space arm of aerospace arm of Bezos's empire, on Friday. The day. So just to make it absolutely clear, to rub Washington Post journalists' faces in the mud, that this was a transactional thing, and he had cowed their owner into withholding this endorsement.
And thousands of people there's been a procession of people very proudly screenshotting their cancelled subscription,
which I regret
page.
Actually.
I think
they should take it out on other bits of Bezos's empire, of which there are many.
Well, so that is the perfect point, isn't it? It's like, don't kill the newspaper, but maybe
kill Prime Video, or
maybe order a bit
Amazon.
less crap from China to come down.
Exactly. I mean, what's going on here? So it wasn't. Funnily enough, it was the second of the week, because the Los Angeles Times owner, Patrick Soon-Shiong, who, by the way, had already sought a job as Trump's healthcare czar, and is owner of the LA Times, had vetoed an editorial backing Harris. Anyone seeing a pattern of developing here? And he has he's a health billionaire. He has medical products that are in the pipeline for FDA approval and all. I mean, I sent you that wonderful headline in the Washington Post, which was a wonderful piece of self-trolling. It said, "Some billionaires, CEOs hedge bets as Trump vows retribution." And I think that the brilliant Timothy Schneider, who's been one of the great sort of scholars and commentators upon everything that's happened in this sort of new era of autocracy and populism, in his book on tyranny, calls this obeying in advance.
That's right. Brilliant phrase.
It's a wonderful, and I don't think it's that these people assume that Trump is going to win, but since the polls suggest he might, they're hedging their bets on the basis that, and I think they're probably right. I think that, if Harris becomes president, she won't be pleased that this happened, but I don't think she's going to have that kind of vengeful mentality that is front and center of Trump's MO. So
that's right.
That's what they're doing.
My takeaway from it was business, and I said it earlier, business is business, and the consideration, the ultimate consideration, and in fact the responsibility for any business owner with shareholders is to look after the business and to make sure the business is protected. And if the problem is when you get a business like a newspaper business that becomes part of a bigger consideration. So Bezos using the newspaper to lubricate other parts of his business empire, that is a problem. And I just think there needs to be some sort of absolute separation from media ownership where it comes to other considerations in other businesses. But of course, that would never happen, and it's a nonsense to even suggest it. And we've lived with it for so long here with Rupert Murdoch.
Yeah, but you see, this is the interesting thing, is that obviously that there's an evolution of this that goes through, from William Randolph Hearst through Murdoch, Maxwell, now Rothermere and Dacre, and all the rest of it, and this on this side of the pond. But I think we're now entering a more dangerous zone, which is, particularly if Trump wins, which is you've got literally a handful of billionaires. Bezos, the owners of the other big techs, Elon Musk in particular. And Trump's relationship to them is starting to resemble, with obvious change, modifications, Putin's relationship to the oligarchs, right? And I worry about a world in which a tiny number of strongmen leaders and billionaire, tycoons of this sort, these very singular individuals. These are not traditional CEOs who think it's groovy to have a private jet and have a retreat in the Bahamas, right? These are people of wealth that's never been had before in the world, and control over a range of things which they look benign on the outside, but actually when you think that Amazon basically controls half the internet and Elon Musk controls Starlink, which can have major geopolitical implications on war zones and everything, suddenly it's not funny anymore.
No, that's right.
And I worry that absolutely we should carry on worrying about the traditional media ownership structures, but we're moving up a gear where these guys are essentially controlling everything. And if Trump wins, he will be in contact with Xi in China, with Putin in Russia, and he, Elon, Jeff Bezos, Mark Zuckerberg, Tim Cook at Apple, they will all be running a huge amount of what happens to us. We started this podcast by talking about bus fares, right? At the other end of the power spectrum are these maniacs, because many of them are maniacs, who have somehow managed to accrue unprecedented power in the history of the world.
And what concerns me is the amorality that is absolutely core to their business models. They are their businesses. Morality doesn't enter into it, and we've seen it. At a very far end of the spectrum. There are some household names: Bosch, BMW, Mercedes-Benz. I've got a little list here. Volkswagen.
Yes, I know where you're heading on this.
Krupp, Tyson. Many of these businesses still massively profitable, all thrived under the Nazi regime.
IBM did too.
Used slave labor.
Yeah.
Have all apologized and blah, blah, blah. But we had a conversation around slavery reparations.
Yeah, we did.
And while I was looking at that, it struck me as odd that there's a bit of a blind spot for some of these big companies.
Well,
and it's not talked enough.
I tell you what it is that, I mean, we should always own our own part in this, right? Which is that around 2005 to 7, when what was then called Web 2.0 came around, which was really just broadband and social media and smartphones, everyone got fantastically excited because suddenly things that had cost money were free. It was possible to download everything onto your phone. Your phone stopped being a phone. It became your pocket computer. And everyone put a gloss on it, which is, isn't this wonderful? Isn't the world going to be a great place? Not thinking that giving absolute control over the information flow and algorithmic control over the supply of data to a tiny group of people might not be, the best thing in the world.
Yeah.
And we didn't think about it because we were greedy and lazy, and we didn't think about it. I mean, I don't mean you and me, but I mean everyone.
Yeah.
We ran at it for our dopamine hits, and now we're paying the price. I think Chris Hughes' name said a few years back, he was one of the founders of Facebook, and said, Facebook as it then was and Meta as it now is has to be broken up. And there are instruments in the American jurisdiction, at least, that antitrust laws that can prevent these monopolies from emerging. The question is, do you have in prospect, even if Harris becomes president, an administration with the power and the will and frankly the desire to spend so much political capital on cutting these people down to size?
Yeah.
It's a very, very long shot, I think.
I agree, and the transference of our own IP, if you like, every time you click one of those accept all GDPR boxes on a website, which we now just do blindly just to get to where we want to get to. We don't care, blah, blah, blah. We're transferring ownership of our intent.
Yes.
And we live in an intent economy where if I can understand where you're going to spend your next £100, where you're going to go on holiday, where you shop, what television services you use, what mobile phone brand you use, then I have real power to throw ads at you, to try and convince you to spend your money here, now, there and everywhere. But we're volunteering all of that information for free and building this huge economy for this handful of billionaires. It strikes me as very interesting because I'm a great believer in projection, that people tend to project onto others what they are themselves doing. And I find it fascinating that the sort of MAGA world, the big tech world, is endlessly whinging about the World Economic Forum and global government and globalism and, secret conspiracies to run us all and, nano chips in vaccines and lockdown as a drill. You don't have to put a bloody nano chip in the vaccine. But the people who are, if there's any, I don't think there's an organization, but the network, Anne Applebaum put it very well as Autocracy Inc., the network of autocrats in league with tech tycoons is already there. Yeah. And it is running, its power is unbelievably great. Yeah. And there is at the moment no liberal democratic response to it that really carries any weight. It's a big task for the next 10 years. Right. Well, that turned into a very broad-ranging conversation. It certainly did. It did. I hope you guys found it interesting. Don't cancel the Washington Post. Don't cancel the Washington. Journalism. I remember an editor telling me, look, in journalism, you make 10 decisions on any given day. If you get 7 of them right, you're doing brilliantly. You know, see, journalism is a litany of mistakes surrounded by accidental. And it really wasn't the journalist's fault. It wasn't the journalist's fault. And the irony is, Washington Post subscriptions have never been healthier than when Donald Trump was in power. Yes. So if Trump does get in, then you'll need him more. You'll need people like the Washington Post more than ever. To scrutinise. It has been darkly funny that a newspaper that has as its slogan "Democracy dies in darkness" went dark on Friday. It really did. Very sad. Sad. So support journalism. Hey, do you know how else people can support good journalism? Go on. Let me tell you. Oh, they can subscribe to the New European. You never. Yeah, and we don't. We've never done endorsements because it's so bloody obvious what we think. I don't think we have to. We really don't need to. And also, presently, we don't really have anyone much to endorse. So no, that's right. Sadly, but anyway, do subscribe to the New European. You can do so from just £1 a week. And if you subscribe to the New European from £1 a week, I will send you 2 packs, that's 12 fantastically witty Christmas cards.
They're so witty.
And you will be the envy of all your friends and family when they receive them. They'll think, God damn it, I wish I'd sent a card that funny.
Doerness will be banished.
Go to theneweuropean.co.uk/2 Matts. That's the number 2, MATTS. Come and see us live at the Phoenix on November the 25th. There's a link in the show notes. Do send in any questions and feedback to 2mats@tnepublishing.com. That's the number 2, MATTS @tnepublishing.com. Thank you as ever to our team at Rethink Audio, led by Matt Hill. And until Friday,
have a great week.
Have a fantastic week.